So good afternoon. Continue from where we left it at. We're still on the third topic, and more specifically, we are on the economies of scale. And just to remind you, just want to have a quick rehash of it. If you recall, on Thursday, this was the last bit we did. And we said these are just the advantages that accrue to a farm. And notice by farm, you can actually spell it either as F-A-R-M or F-I-R-M. And the analysis will simply be the same because, you know, economics is applied in many arenas. So if it is the case that also agriculture also has something called a farm, you can imagine that there are contexts within which we can argue this. Perhaps before I begin in earnest, and as I really wait for people to join, there are people who are sending me their assignments as letters today. And I wish to very kindly direct you to the sheet that I sent. There is a time and a date for submission. And this is the second time I'm saying this. No, you adults, for better or for worse, you are adults right now. And you know, when every time I have to speak about this every time, I guess it's a case whereby some people are wasting other people's time. So I don't want to speak about it too much, but to the extent that you handed your assignment today or after the deadline anyway, I think I can only excuse only one dude who alijieleza, lakini pia kujieleza alijieleza in a way that was a bit disappointing, because I don't expect me as a mere economist to advise a computer scientist to open an email as a cure to his or her not submitting on time. One of you is actually even insisting on submitting on WhatsApp, and every time I tell him or her, I don't know who it is, submission is purely via email. So let's not really be speaking about this too much anyway. Sometimes I'm one person who doesn't like repeating himself if I can avoid it. So in short, I'll not accept those assignments. It's just too much disrespect to your fellow classmates who were disciplined enough to really do the assignment and submit it on time. I'm not really accepting any assignment, and the implication of that is that now you are tending towards a point whereby I'll ask you why you are in the class in the first place. So take these assignments seriously, which means attend classes so that you can say here when the assignments are being done and you do it. And hata kama si hivyo, I believe you have a common WhatsApp platform where these things can be shared. I think this is the last time I'll give that preaching. The next time, mtajionea tu wenyewe. So just a quick recap. Last time, of course, we talked about some advantages accruing to farms in terms of lower costs, simply due to the fact that they are operating at a higher rather than on a lower scale of operation. And we saw there were two types, internal and external, right? And we basically had a discussion about them. Specialization, you know, perhaps one of the first concepts that I learned in economics, except my classes maybe, is this aspect of specialization. It's a very, very important economic concept to know and also to really take on board, right? Just you gaining efficiency simply because of repeated task performance and basically breaking the production process in various stages. If you think about car assembly, as complex as it is, if it were to be left to one person, it will be that bit more challenging. But if there's only just one person, maybe to paint, another person to make the engine, another person to make sure that the wheels are just sorted out, right? Another person to just make sure that the assembly runs as it should be. You can imagine that no wonder nowadays we can talk about such a complex gadget like a car really being made in terms of hours, if not minutes, at the end of the day. And if you go to those companies, it's actually a miracle of modern technology, how it gets done. Nowadays, you guys, you are the AT people, you know, artificial intelligence is coming on board, such that actually some people are arguing maybe in the next 20 years, there'll be no need to work. Our jobs will have been taken over. Right now, there'll be a robot teaching you ECON 100. No need for a lawyer because there will be an app somewhere that will say, if you have this problem, this is the cure. However specific your problem is, there will be a cure for it. Accountancy. Some of these jobs that even 10 years ago, I was afraid to talk about them being redundant. Right? Accounting, lawyering, economisting, and such like other jobs. They're actually imagining a scenario whereby most of these even high level jobs, I don't know whether they'll come up with a software for this job that everybody is going for, which is in politics. But that will require a very high level of AI know-how or machine learning, because you have to learn all the bad habits that are due to these people who are called politicians. So I don't know, maybe you people, you can advise me whether with the knowledge that you have, maybe AI has reached that level where bad habits can be learned by those machines. Okay, so specialization, economic of increased dimension. What else did we have? Factor indivisibility, principle of multiples. We did this. That's why I'm just going just by way of rehashing them, right? Those are part of the internal economies of scale. What about external economy? We talked about three. Can either be monetary, what we are calling pecuniary or financial. Safaricom is able to generate, borrow more at lower interest rates because of the history that they have. They have more collateral. They have lower administration costs. They have more sources of finances compared to you as a single person. Right now, I don't think I can access any external market for loans outside Kenya. I stand corrected, but I believe me as an individual, that will be next to impossible. Whereas something like Safaricom is able to do that. Something like even these banks that we have, the KCBs, when they want even to borrow to even loan out from these international funds, they're able to do that, right? Because of the reasons that you can see on the screen: more collateral, lower administration cost, more sources of finance, more options. So they can afford to be a bit picky about what options suits them best. Okay. Marketing economies, right? Bigger firms are able to enjoy discounts, big discounts, sometimes as much as even, I think I've seen this one being as much as, I've seen 45% discount simply because of bulk buy, trade discounts. They're able to hire market specialists. as opposed to a smaller farm, which arguably will not have the financial resources to hire the same. And these market specialists are able to come in on board and tell you the market today is this way. This is the data. Maybe this is what we should do as a company. Okay. Yeah, they're able to withstand risks better. And I gave you the example of Kenya Power. Right? Kenya Power, when you think about also Kenya Airways, you hear these companies making quite humongous losses, and you wonder sometimes, you fear for them, whether they will be able to offer the services, but they continue offering because of many factors, sometimes state patronage, especially in the case of Safaricom, not really Safaricom, but what do we call this company? Kenya Airways. Right, even Kenya Power to a smaller extent, although it is partly owned by the state, partly owned by shareholders. Yeah, can imagine the way Safaricom has been able to diversify, especially over the last 15 or so years, such that right now when they report their profits, and they reported a profit of 69 billion for the last financial year, right? A big chunk of it becomes less and less from the original reason as to why they were set up, which was voice and SMS. Nowadays, they talk about a big chunk of it coming from data, something that they came up with later. And of course, they're famous M-Pesa. Okay, so that product diversification ensures that if for some reason there was some app that will come in, and you can see things like WhatsApp came later, and they have offered arguably cheaper options whereby you can just use your data to communicate without having airtime. They need to use tariffs, right? If they were to stick to that, they will have exposed themselves dangerously to the market. But I don't think if you go and ask Ndegwa whether he worries whether voice and SMS can disappear as a point of income for the company. Okay. So you lower your trading risk when you diversify. And that's why you find even companies coming up with new products, rebranding, sometimes even chasing difficult workers and hiring more market-ready ones, and etc. and etc. I was giving you that summary simply because there is this other side of economies of scale, right? Whereby as you increase in size, now profits, not really profits, but costs begin increasing rather than decreasing. So which basically means that you can only enjoy economies of scale up to a certain point. And how economic is that? In my studies of economics, and I was telling you guys, I've studied it since, I think, 97 is when I entered my first year. Economics will never give you this heaven. At the end of the day, there'll always be something, some joy to be had, but up to some point. Up to some point. And that's why we are all about this maximization thing. What is that point, right? Or optimization. So you can see that even in the concept of scale, the reality becomes the simple fact that you can only enjoy it up to a certain point, beyond which you'll now be talking about these economies and not economies. Even before we go through that, we can actually appreciate it better via this curve, where on the y-axis, we have the costs, on the x-axis, we have the output, and we are tracking a farm's long-run average costs, and you end up with an animal looking like that. And you can see from the beginning of operations, right? from the beginning of operations up to a certain point. Let me just pick something here I can use, right? Up to a certain point, the optimal point, so to speak, the minima, right? The minima of the what? Of the long run average curve. The firm was enjoying economies of scale by lowering costs simply by increasing in size. Because when you're making more output, of course, you're making more output simply because you are expanding in scale of operations for the firm. Okay. Just a minute. Yeah, I'm in class. I'm in class. I'll call you. Okay. Sorry about that. So up to a certain point beyond which, as you continue increasing in scale, up to infinity, you can actually see the second part of the curve, basically showing us that aspect of the average costs increasing. So there are two parts where the firm is enjoying economies of scale up to that Q star amount of output. And then beyond that, we are talking about simply because the long run average costs are increasing, the firm enjoying these economies of scale. And how do these economies arise? Right? That is what I want us to talk about very quickly. Then we can call it a day. Two main ways. Could be because of management difficulties. Can also be because of industry-wide increase in prices. Arguably, even what is happening right now, and you can know now all over the world, we are in inflationary period. Something that has not been seen for quite a while. In some economies, as much as 40 or so years. Okay. And as we shall see in chapter 6, inflation will just be defined by increase in general sustained increase in the price levels of goods and services within an economy. So you might find the advantages that were accruing basically being wiped out because of this new reality that the price of capital and the price of labor are increasing. In capital, we call it interest rates as reward, and labor, of course, if you remember, we call it wages. Okay. And we can actually even discuss this in turn, because when you talk about a bigger company will require hiring of more managers. And the reality is that at some point will become, however good those managers are, however good they are. There's a principle I always like. It's not part of economics, it's part of management called the Peter Principle. The Peter Principle tells us that we eventually reach our level of incompetency, however good you are. Right? So for the future code developers, know that and be humble. For the future hardware specialists, know that and be humble. For the future, even leaders, because some of you might even want to become leaders in Egerton or somewhere else. Know that the reality with life is that there is a point at which, however good you are, you'll eventually rise to your level of incompetency. And this is something that I like, because even if you think about this, a company can grow to such a point whereby it becomes difficult to manage it, to coordinate tasks, to communicate, to maintain morale. Mkiwa wadogo, especially in the maintenance of morale, inakuwa rahisi for you to maintain morale because you know each other. You can hype each other up. Okay. But and it's really for you people, because you people, you are in the certain in an era whereby I think your space is really still exploding, I believe. Maybe it's not exploding as fast as it used to before, but I believe that's what's happening, right? So you can find that actually as it becomes bigger, you always need to be on the lookout for this. If you want to maintain morale, you have to make sure, and you have to bring on board people to identify, still with the firm's objectives, coordinate tasks better, communicate better, both vertically, right, from top down, bottom up, as some people might say, but also laterally between your peers. Okay, right? And, we are saying also external diseconomies can actually arise simply because of shortage of inputs. And this shortage, of course, you know, when there's a shortage, if you remember, we are talking about the supply curve, right? A shortage will be shown as a leftward shift. And if there is that shortage, if the demand stays the same, what we are saying is that the prices will increase, say, from P1 to P2. So in fact, costs are prices. If you think about them in other ways, they are just prices in other ways, because somebody, you're buying something from somebody as a firm. So to you, it's a cost, but to the other person, it's an income or something, right? So maybe that's how it can be shown. So that's the much that I wanted to talk about, this economies of scale, so that I can just now tackle the last bit of theories of the firm, and then you can begin with our chapter 4. Right? And that is returns to scale. And sometimes, because of the to scale, being part of both of these two phrases, sometimes it becomes a bit tricky for people to distinguish them, to an extent that actually some people actually handle them as one and the same thing, and yet they are not. You'll appreciate that we've been talking about this animal called costs. I don't know why this thing is behaving like that, right? Yes, costs with regard to economies of scale. So it's a cost concept. When you talk about economies of scale, you have to talk about costs or pricing, which is actually, as I said, another aspect of cost. But RTS, returns to scale, as we'll define it, ignores costs for purposes of its discussion, and basically just sees it as a quantitative concept. So you might be asked in an exam situation to distinguish the two. That's basically how you distinguish them. Economies of scale is a cost concept because it talks about advantages accruing to the firm simply due to the fact that they will be lowering costs due to the fact that the firm is increasing in size. But with RTS, we ask in the same question as we did with elasticity of production. That question being, there's a 1% change in inputs. By how much in percentage terms will output change? So you can see we are sticking to the same quantitative ask. But what is the difference between elasticity of production and returns to scale? Elasticity of production asks with respect to a specific input. Yes, I think I'm still correct. But returns to scale asks the same question in the sense that all inputs are changing. So that's the key difference. Here we're not talking about if it is y, if our production function is y, x1, x2, up to xn. We're not only talking about dy, dx1 or dy, dx2 for marginal product, for example, or the elasticity of production. But we're talking about the sense whereby all of them, x1, x2, x3, x4, up to xn, are being varied by 1%. And then we are seeing by how much output will vary. So conceptually, they are similar with elasticity of production, so that if you got that aspect of elasticity of production, these ceteris paribus should not be difficult. But having said that, of course, there is that small but very important difference that here we're talking about all inputs changing and that affecting the output level. And it becomes very important for you to make that distinction, right? Because as you shall see, when you talk about these three types, increasing returns to scale, constant returns to scale, and decreasing returns to scale, we are talking about them the same way as we did the elasticity of production, right? Such that for an increasing returns to scale, it will be the case that a 1% change in all inputs, don't forget, leads to a more than 1% change in output. What if you recall how we defined it? We talked about a more than proportionate change in output. Just a minute. Sorry about that. Too many reciters. This is what you want to avoid in the university, you people. The receipt. Na wanakuuliza 20 minutes to the exam. So I don't know, unashindwa utawasaidia namna gani saa zingine. Right? For constant returns to scale is a case whereby a 1% change in all inputs will lead to the exact amount of percentage change. Let me put equals, because there we have more than, it's only fair that we have equals. Yeah. Equals to 1% change in output. So here we'll talk about not more than, but we'll just talk about proportionate change. right? And lastly, decreasing returns to scale, the same question, 1% change in all inputs will be given by logic. I believe I'm even boring some of you to tears, but I'll be remiss in my duty if I don't finish the train of argument. So I will talk about less than a 1% change in output. And even when you calculate and you get the values, you'll get these values for increasing returns to scale being a value more than 1. And actually that is what indicates that the production process is enjoying an increasing returns to scale. Exactly 1 constant returns to scale. Less than 1 decreasing returns to scale. Let's do it practically. Nothing like a practical attempt to these things. So let's make clear that. So when you'll be doing your NNA, don't mind this. I think when I was doing this, it's higher level mathematics. Don't mind it, but it's still part of economics. I just like using this, what we have already argued before, to bring this concept home very, very well. And I find this, can I call it a diagram, or can I call it a graph, a series of graphs? Bring that concept home very, very well. So let me just expand this so that for those who are using smaller gadgets, you can be helped. This is a graph which is just a series of isoquants. If you remember how we trade isoquant on the x-axis, we have one factor, and on the y-axis, we have another factor, right? So L, of course, for labor, K for capital. And we have these isoquants, and I shall call them by their respective points of, these are not points of targets, but points of meeting between the respective isoquants and this arrow over here. So we have A, B, C, D. And if you can allow me, I'll just call them isoquant A, isoquant B, isoquant C, isoquant D. Remember how we defined what an isoquant is. Simply a graphical combination of inputs, more specifically to our question here, capital and labor, that track points of equal level of output. So that you'll find that A has an output level worth 50 units, B 150 units, C 300 units, and lastly D 400 units. And of course, you talk about a firm having always the dream to expand in scale. And if we're expanding in scale, what is happening? This basically, we are moving from one isoquant to the other, A to B, B to C, C to D. Because the story here, or the narrative, will be that more units are being produced. Okay, from 50 to 150 to 300 to 400 units, for example. So what we are doing here, and why I like this diagram very much, is you can see that in moving from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, and 4 to 8, what we are doing is that we are doubling our inputs, both capital and labor, times 2. 2 times 2, 4. 4 times 2, 8. And that's actually what farms expansion is all about, because you cannot say that you're having a company giving you an income like Safaricom, 69 billion, and they're employing the same people that they were employing in 2000 when they were beginning. Okay. So we are increasing both inputs and we are seeing how output is increasing. Question becomes, at what zone will we be talking about increasing returns to scale, or a constant returns to scale, or a decreasing returns to scale? As one moves from A to B, B to C, C to D, where will we be arguing that this is increasing, constant, or a decreasing returns to scale? From what we have on the board, this can very well be proven that from A to B, the firm will be enjoying an increasing returns to scale. And how will we be doing that? Of course, from the input side, X, we are doubling. We are moving from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8. So we are doubling. And in percentage terms, what happens when you double? You can do it, right? 2 minus 1, the original, over 1 multiplied by 100. And that will be, I believe, 100%. Same with 2 to 4. To just give us the same percentage, 4 over 2, 2 times 100. That will be 100. And lastly, 4 to 8, of course, 8 minus 4 over 4 multiplied by 100. That should give you also 100%. So it will be very, very clear what we are doing on the input side, because we are doubling. Basically, we are increasing the inputs by 100%. And then we want to see, will the output increase by 100%? Will it be exactly 100%? Or will it be less than 100%? Because when you talk about now that returns to scale, those are what we'll be working with. Okay. So let's see from what is happening from A to B and why are we sure that it is increasing returns to scale? Short answer, it will be increasing return to scale because, as we have seen, 2 minus 1 over 1 times 100 will give us 100%. So essentially, the firm is asking if there is 100% change in inputs, all inputs, both capital and labor in our case. What is the percentage change in output? How will you determine this? The output level in shifting from isoquant A to B, output will have increased from 50 to 150 units. So what is that percentage increase? And simple mathematics will tell you that 150 over 50 minus 50 over 50 times 100, that will give you 100 over 50 times 100. If we do that, that will be 2. So that will be 2%, 2,100%. So what do we conclude? Right? X, the inputs, will have enjoyed 100% increase, and Y will have increased by more than 100%, actually 200%. Even if we were to even just go to our core ask and we divide both X and Y by 100, because that is the percentage, it will be a case whereby we'll talk about a 1% increase in X input yields a 2% increase in Y, but you can still leave it as 100 as we did, right? And that can actually prove that from A to B, in move from A to B, we will have enjoyed an increasing returns to scale. Okay. I hope we are together, but let me just do the other ones and then maybe I can ask that question after I'm through. What about the firm deciding to move from isoquant B to isoquant C? Right? Effectively, they'll be doubling their input. And as we have proven, doubling basically means that inputs is increasing by 100%. Or change. What about Y in terms of the increase? And for Y, B to C, you have 300 units of output at C. And at B, you have 150. This. So 300 minus 150 over 150, algebra, times 100. And it will be clear that that will be 150 over 150 times 100. If we cancel this, we remain with 100%. So it will be a case that X will have changed by 100% and Y will have changed by the same proportional amount. 100. And that's why we're talking about it being a constant returns to scale, because as we said, it's constant because it is a proportional change, right? Input is increasing by 100, output also is increasing by 100. And you can also want to divide it if you want to be a bit pedantic and talk about a 1% increase in change in X leading to a 1% change in Y. Okay. Lastly, moving from C to D, and the narrative here should be clear that we actually increasing in scale, or we are changing the scale of operation. Basically, that's what jumping from this isoquant entails. You are increasing in size. Okay. Let me just grab that to just clutter this for nothing. Same question, right? 100% increase in X, increasing by 100%. Because actually 4 to 8, that's basically what you're doing. X, the inputs are increasing both by 100%. By how much does output increase? The same process. If this is 400, you're moving from 400 to 300. No, from 300 to 400, the percentage change will be 400 over 300 minus 300 over 300, of course, multiplied by 100%. And I believe this will be 100 over 300 times 100. I believe that should give you 33.33%. Okay. So 100% increase in inputs will have yielded a less than 100% increase in output. More specifically, 33.33%. Hence, proving that that increase from C to D basically represents a decreasing returns to scale. Any question? Any questions? Maybe I should not have given assignments this early because all of a sudden you guys, you don't have any questions to ask. Don't know whether I'm the one who is scaring you people or not. The reality of economics is dawning on a good number of you. I have no idea, but I welcome them. And as I say, and I'll not tire of repeating, no questions are too stupid or are too dumb for my class. And as it should be for any university class. Because through that, we learn. Even me, I get more excited by those questions I'm not able to answer in class rather than those I'm able to do, because it gives me changamoto, and I'm a curious person by nature. So I'll basically go back and say, Ramon asked me this, let me answer him or her. I don't know why there are so many calls today for receipts. Hello. How are you? Oh, this is Happiness. I'm in class. Eh? Let's talk at 4. I believe that is why they are changing the exams, the what? The education system. You people and me, because we are the system that will call Anzilishi wa 844. We have been cast to really fear this animal called exams. So if I was teaching you on 111, we will have gone through this, but I want to spare you this. But maybe for those who are curious amongst you, by now you have seen some sort of a pattern emerging from how we teach. We normally start by defining, and then we have graphical examples, and then now there's always a bit of maths to be done at the end. Okay, and at this elementary level, we normally try to minimize the mathematics, but it doesn't hurt for you to even appreciate that there is some animal like this, that whatever we have done in graphical form can always be turned into a mathematical form to really yield some interesting economic realities at the end of the day. So there's normally this production function that we normally like toying with in economics. I'll just want you to know so that sometime you might be with economists and then you'll move taringa kidogo useme, hiyo nilishasikia mahali. But I can assure you you will not be punished if you do not know and you do not reckon with these crazy sums over here. That is also not your assignment. I believe I wrote this 7-8 years ago and it is still there. So any questions on theory of the firm generally? Because actually that marks the end of our class. Not really class, no, sorry. I don't want to see people tuning off, but for chapter 3. So if there's any question, this is the right time for you to ask. Either through raising your hand, you can also like just don't save. You can actually even write something on the chat. As I open the 4th topic. Okay, so if there are no questions, I'll quickly scoot to the 4th topic, and on the critical assumption that everything is understood. Nyanjong has done his work. Apewe. So consumer theory, one thing you'll note, and might come either as a happy relief for you, especially for those who have been a bit curious and been reading, is that there's a lot of similarity in the approach between these two theories. the one that you have just learned, and the one that I'm just about to introduce. A lot of similarity in the approach. Almost as if they were developed by the same person or the same group of people. And that's why you'll always find that when you're being taught this economics, especially the theoretical economics, they'll always follow one another. Not that one is more important than the other. Personally, I start with theory of the firm because I think for the only reason that I was taught that way when I was seated where you are those many years ago. But I find some lecturers beginning with consumer theory and ending with theory of the firm. So hakuna tofauti. Ukienda maybe at master's level and maybe you are doing economics, na ufanye hata hii as a part of your coursework, usiseme na Mr. Nyanjong mbona alifunza tofauti. No, it's just a function of where the lecturer went to the university, maybe who his lecturer was, and what he or she is comfortable with. Okay. I've been using one word from the word go. This is what I lament most of the time in economics. That I don't know, because it's a recent discipline. It's only been in existence for the last 250 years or so. We normally find ourselves having to use concepts and jargons earlier than maybe we feel our students will be comfortable with them. So that's a word that you'll hear me having talked about time to time. I will formally introduce it here, because I've been talking about consumers maximizing their utility, producers maximizing their profits. This theory will now teach us of how consumers indeed do maximize their utility. Right now, I think that's the narrative that should be at home with in the context of economics, that is all about answering that maximization, minimization, optimization problem. Study of how people use their limited means to make purposeful choices. I must have gotten this definition from an American book, because Americans, they're these people who like to show their friendliness, make things a bit easier for their students. So they normally want to remove jargon out of their classes as much as they can. But this is just a way of saying study of how people maximize their utility in not so many words. Okay. I'd wish to interest you in that word or that phrase there. It will actually take you to that very, very important economic imperative of scarcity. So you see the theme recurring. Without scarcity, as I normally say, I have really no right to ask you to spend your scarce shillings. I think I was talking to one of you and she was complaining about how expensive these Zoom classes are over the weekend. I was trying to tell her, no, it's less than the price of bread. Bread utanunua, lakini Zoom, that's where you draw the line. But that's the life we live in anyway. And good. I thank you for having cooperated with me this far. Okay. Study of how people maximize their utility. Actually, that's basically what I should just have written there. Okay. So basically that will be what at the end of this course, of this topic, that's the question that we shall seek to answer. We shall try to answer, right? What are the key assumptions of this topic? begin by warning you, personally, my mind, I'm more mathematical. Even the whole of this weekend, I've just been sat in front of my desk trying to solve some mathematical problem. And that's actually how economics is, especially over the last 100 or so years. Right now, there is a movement that is saying, no, tunaribu economics. Let's take it to where Ken Adam Smith defined it. And this is the one theory that has been very, very challenging sometimes to make it to really be answerable to mathematical manipulation. Because sometimes we do things and even as we are left with more questions than answer. Because if I were to ask even the girls in the class what hairstyles they have, I'll be surprised that if the hairstyles will be the same. Right? If I were to ask maybe the men the same questions, seeing as it is that nowadays, even you people, you are people who consume hairstyles. As I said, I will be hard pressed to come up with two exact hairstyle. And if there are two, maybe there'll be a chance that maybe you are people who interact more than once. Maybe you are friends, maybe you are kins, something like that. Mode of dressing, what you ate in the morning, what you ate for lunch, up to even your biro choices. I have to go to Nakuru to buy my biros because if you put me to this normal big pens, I have a problem working with them. I have to have these ink pens most of the time. A bit expensive, but they give me my peace. When I'm studying, I'm happy. I can breathe easy. So man by very nature is a very complex being. And yet here comes a theory that purports to be able to generalize or aggregate all these choices and to predict that because of this is what we expect. So it's one of the theories. Theory of the farm, fully on board. Give me demand theory, fully on board. Market theory, fully on board. Even the macro part of the course are fully on board. This is one theory that 25 years later, bado huwa niko na maswali. Lakini lazima niifunze. So here we go. What are the key assumptions? Consumers understand their choices and the prices associated with each choice. And when we talk about the prices from an economic point of view, that animal that we well know, we have studied ad infinitum, rears its ugly head, opportunity cost. Okay. If you remember, opportunity cost is about choices. You can only have one hairstyle at a time. Unless you are mad or you are performing some skit, you can only dress in one mode of dressing at a time. You can only wear one shoe at a time. Even for the people who are buying cars, and I was just with a doctor friend of mine a few minutes, and that's why I was late for the class. And we were talking about politics, and we were like, sometimes we steal up to a point where that stealing doesn't make sense anymore. Because, and you were trying to say that sometimes when you do something out of your own sweat, you feel it and you feel sweet about it. But saa zingine umeiba, umepatiwa kandarasi hujafanya vizuri because you want to maximize on your profits. As a result of which you're able to buy 10 TXs. What will be the joy? And you can only drive one at a time. So I look at our politics sometimes and I weep because I'm like, I don't even think those people are happy at the end of the day. You're a billionaire, but you have to look at your back lest ESCC strikes and all that. Very, very high opportunity costs associated with such choices. So consumers understand their choices and the prices associated with these choices. Another way to say it, consumers understand the possibilities available to them and the opportunity cost associated with those possibilities. That's why you can see those highlighted and bracketed terms. You can read that assumption both ways to make the same sense. Keyword in the second assumption, and I wish to invite you to understand it as such. You are an active participant in the decision making as a consumer. Hii mambo ya kusema ni God tu, ni God manze. We do not entertain it when it comes to consumer theory. You are ultimately responsible for the decision you make in terms of your consumer choices, right? So that when it talk about maximization of utility, it must be the case that you considered it actively, you engaged your brain. And at some point you read economic books and actually they even go biological. It's the beauty of economies because we borrow quite a bit out of the pure sciences. They can talk about even medulla oblongata, what happens in the brain, right? At the point of making a decision to prove that indeed that conclusion that they had is the right conclusion. Right? But here, because this is elementary, we just talk about you just being an active participant in the decision making. Consumers actively consider the alternatives available to them, and to that extent, they are able or they have the ability to make the best choice, the optimal choice. As I said, I think when I was writing this, I must have been inspired by an American book because I'm finding this totally lacking the jargon that we are used as having gone through the British system of education, but it doesn't have the same concept. Important terms, and this must remind you of the terms that we did in the other theory, and that's why I told you these terms are similar. Let's start with the word utility. And I gave you this, and maybe you can even ignore what are on the slides. Utility is simply the ability of a good or service to satisfy a need. Okay, you can leave all those paragashas that are on the slide and just understand it as that. And this is actually basically even in the understanding or even defining the concept of utility. You understand that even two human beings will rarely have the same conformity or agreement in terms of their choices. That's why I started by saying it's a crazy theory, but we must learn it. So let's learn it. How do you aggregate? And yet utakuta ya kuwa hata matwins, kuna wakati watakuja wakasema ya kuwa we are exactly alike in how we do what? We see things, our consumer choices. So the satisfaction or pleasure consumers derive out of consuming goods or services is what we call utility. Just the ability of good or service to satisfy a need. Okay. When we now delve deeper into the concept of utility, we have concepts that should remind you of some concepts that we learned about in topic 3. If you remember, total product, average product, and marginal product. Their sisters or brothers, if you like, are total utility, average utility, marginal utility. But here, especially, we don't talk about average utility so much as total and marginal utility, because those are the most important for consumer theory. Right? The total amount of satisfaction derived out of consuming a good or service. You don't have this, I don't know whether I wrote it in the resource book, but I know they are not in the slides. So in case they are not in the slides, what do we call it? Resource book. There are two measurements for utility. Maybe that's where I should have begun. So if you can write this somewhere, please do. We have what we call cardinal utility. Actually, they are theorems. So this one, we call it cardinal utility theorem. And the second one, we call it the ordinal utility theorem. When economics was developing, of course, things were becoming more complex. The scholars then were beginning now to put in place the frameworks of understanding the concept as they understood them. There came a point of departure at some point between economists, especially in this theory. There are people we called cardinalists versus ordinalists. Cardinalists sweared on the measurability of utility. They said that just because just the same way you can measure miles or kilometers or kilograms, right? Or inches, you can equally measure the satisfaction that you are able to derive out of consuming a good or a service. Indeed, they are very, very serious that they came up with a unit of measurement that they called a util. So you can imagine a case whereby in eating slices of pizza, right? I'll be able to calculate the total product. Maybe if I have three slices, let me just call them first slice, second slice, and the third slice, that we are able to measure it in terms of utils. Nasemanga bangi saa zingine is not a good food. But I'm able to say that the first slice was worth 1,000 units, say. Second one, say 700. The third one, 500. So after eating the third slice of pizza, and I'm reasonably satisfied, an economist will be able to come and say, sum up the utils. And that, I believe, will give us 2,200 utils. This becomes the total utility. Ordinal utility ordinalists disagreed greatly with the cardinalists, and they said, hiyo ni bangi mko nayo kwa kichwa, in not so many words. They said there's no way you can measure satisfaction Right now, you are in the campus and you are looking at each other and you are admiring one another. And sometimes, unafika njia panda, there are two ladies who you want, or two men who you want. In the interest of gender equality, I had to go that way. I don't believe you go, or there's an app that you can put on the forehead of one and the other, and then you say, hapa nimepata 3,000 utils, na hapa nimepata 2,500. Let me go with the one with 3,000. We don't do that. If you go to a shop to buy an item of clothing, I don't believe I could be wrong. As I said, AI, and I've been reading for the last 1 or 2 years, vitu zinanipita, huja ikawa pia nimepitwa na hiyo. But I am feeling strongly in my bones that there is no way in which somebody goes to the shop and says, even in the branding, to making a branding decision that we prefer this brand more than the other. Rarely do we, actually never do we. We don't even talk about rarely. But we almost never come and say, this I have measured and I've seen that this item satisfies me better than the other one on account of it having higher utils. We don't do that. Okay. So this theory actually here, as much as we shall make a few examples with cardinal utility, but this consumer theory will be based on this more realistic way by ordinalists that says that you cannot measure utility. But having said that, it is just enough for one to rank his or her preferences. Just enough for you to say you like so and so more than so and so. You like that item of clothing more than the other. You like this kind of food more than the other. And we note it down, end of story. Okay. But we shall leave it. Cardinal utility, the beauty of it is that it offers. It's a good academic exercise sometimes in terms of it offering at least those scenarios that we can calculate, and we can even say total utility is this much, marginal utility is this much. So the total amount of satisfaction derived out of consuming a good or service. And please, the way I was warned by my Econ 100 teacher, or the person who taught me the equivalent of that, is what I'll warn you. And maybe this is where I should have begun. To consume is not, in capital letters, to eat. Eating is just but one of the subsets of consumption. That's why I can say you can consume a car without eating it. You can consume an item of clothing without eating it. What you are doing, you are deriving utility. You are deriving satisfaction out of consuming or out of having, let me not define a word by the same word, the good or service. What is marginal utility? Marginal, whenever you see it, the concept is the same. The beauty of economics is that the additional satisfaction gained by the consumption of an extra unit of good or service. You are just asking the normal, traditional, marginal question that I've consumed that extra slice of pizza. I've bought a new extra car, a new laptop, a new printer, new bread. I'm just looking at what is in front of me. New cup, for example. What is that additional satisfaction that I will have gained out of that decision to consume an extra unit of that good, an extra unit of that service? And that's basically where cardinal utility comes in academically, for academic exercise, to make us even calculate this, and we can say, marginal utility is this, total utility is that. We are in the business of maximizing utility, maximizing satisfaction. Can it be maximized infinitely? Just as I told you when we were doing these economies of scale, this can only exist in your dream. And the beauty of dreams, even dreams are finite. They can never be infinite. Kiota ya kuwa umeangukia pesa, lazima utaamuka and you will be disappointed. Right? Kiota ya kuwa Betsafe wamekupatia kitita, utaamuka and you realize you are the same broke guy you were before. That's the reality of life anyway. So even with utility, this maximization becomes what mathematically we call a limited or a constrained maximization. What do we mean by this? You can only enjoy utility only to the extent that your money, your income, your budget will allow you to, and not any further. If you have 100 shillings, you can only buy goods or services worth 100 shillings. 1,000 shillings, the same. Okay, 10 times more. 10,000 shillings, the same, 10 times more. A million, a billion, a trillion. Even Elon Musk, as rich as he is, he can only fund Kenyan budget for only 2 years, and then he becomes dead broke. Broke like all of us. Okay. So even the richest amongst us actually is under the subject of what we call what? Constrained maximization, in that sense that you cannot have everything you wish to have. You'll always be constrained by your income, right? So even in making these decisions, you can only make them within the limits of your income. Kenyan economy has been very, very interesting over the last few months. Personally, I have not earned a shilling the whole of this year. But the last salary I enjoyed, like this is my salary, thanks be to God, it's now 30th. That was last November. So you can imagine how that has actually constrained me, even in terms of the lifestyle I was used to before. Don't forget, I have an assistant, I have to pay some money. I have a home I have to run, right? You have a family also you have to take care of. So sometimes you wake up and you are like a headache, automatic. But such is life. You cannot complain too much. Our employer decided that we should not be going to strike every 2 days. So I am told they decided to punish us and punish us greatly. That's why for some months you are out there. Okay. So even the limit that I had to limit it further, because sometimes you find that now you don't necessarily have that money to play around with the way you previously did. Right? Wow. So we are normally constrained by this budget, and we can only make our consumer decisions cognizant that there is a limit. This budget constraint or this budget limit, we formally refer to it as a budget constraint, showing the consumers purchase opportunities as a combination of goods that can be bought at given prices using a given amount of income. Conceptually, we always assume that you only have 2 bundles of goods. We call them goods, but bundles of goods. Right? So if we have those 2 bundles, X1 and X2, and the price of bundle X1 is P1, and the price of bundle P2 is P2, X2 is P2, their respective products, P1, X1, the sum of their respective product equates for a consumer maximizing his utility to what we call the consumer's disposable income, M. Okay. Okay. So this is actually how we conceive that budget constraint. A lot of calls coming in today. So to maximize, because we are in the business of maximization, we normally talk about consumer having one and only one objective: to maximize his utility. But as we said, it's a constrained maximization. You can only maximize subject to the constraint imposed by your what? Your income. And that becomes your budget constraint. Mathematically, we express it in this way, where here we have what we call the utility, a consumer's utility function. We normally express it that way, subject to what we call the budget constraint. Okay. And that is that. So I seem to have gotten an emergency. I just seen some text coming in that I thought were calls. So today I propose to stop there. And I think I had already sent the other link. So we shall pick up from here on Thursday. Okay. So have a good day.